Black activists attack Catholic school kids. Liberals want to burn down the Catholic school. Karen Pence goes to teach at a Christian school, and the left explodes because they actually believe in Christianity. And 15 genders coming to California kindergartens near you. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Every week we cover those stories impacting K-12 classrooms, college campuses around the world, and the nation. Greetings to all of our listeners. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to our podcast on iTunes. It is free. You can get it other places as well. Never miss an episode. It's drdukeshow.com. We'll help you get it on the internet. We've got some really important stories today, so I'm going to stop blabbering and get it over to my wingman, who's actually a wing hobbit, Katie Petrick.
I'm a wing woman.
A wing woman.
Okay, so the top story this week is that the American educational system has gained a teacher, and it's Second Lady Karen Pence. She's decided to teach art at a Christian school, and predictably, the media went crazy. So Karen Pence has decided to teach art twice a week at Emmanuel Christian School in Northern Virginia. She's taught for about a dozen years prior to this time. And what happened was the media found out that this Christian school actually abides by biblical Christian teachings regarding homosexuality and the fact that there are two genders, male and female. And so the school reserves its right to refuse applicants or expel students who would violate the moral principles of the school. So, of course, CNN, in all its wisdom, air quotes, said they questioned whether or not Karen Pence should get Secret Service. What happened was John King asked a panel.
Does it matter that all taxpayers pay for her housing? All taxpayers pay for her Secret Service protection? It's not her fault that she needs protection. This is the world we live in. But all taxpayers subsidize her life. Does it matter?
So you mean, does her First Amendment freedoms get somehow curtailed because taxpayers pay for her accommodations and her security? I don't know that a lot of people would sign on to that.
Yeah, the thing that gets me about this is that the progressive left acts like they can live with Christianity as long as you don't follow it. Your Christianity is perfectly okay if nobody actually acts or enacts it. And so the progressive media, particularly places like CNN, they're actually stunned to find Christians behaving in Christian ways. It's a sad commentary on Christianity, really, how many so-called Christians and Christian churches don't believe biblically, don't follow traditional Christianity. How many Christian churches have become breeding grounds for social justice Marxist theological perspectives. So CNN actually finds that Mike Pence and his wife actually follow Christian doctrine, and it drives them crazy. Remember when Mike Pence said he would not have dinner alone with a woman, any woman that wasn't his wife, not because he was sexist, but he wanted to make sure from his Christian scruples he did not put himself or put another woman in any position to violate his marital vows. It's a perfectly wholesome, manly thing to do. I want to protect myself and my wife. Hey, you think about these Gillette commercials, right? Where Gillette's lecturing men about how they have to respect women, how they have to stop being bullies, how they have to stop being sexual predators. Mike Pence is the walking billboard for this. He is not going to do anything that compromises his marriage vows to his wife. He is not going to, in any way, shape, or form, put himself in a position to compromise those vows, and then he was called a bigot for doing that and a sexist. So you can't win. Here's my thought at the end of this story. You got to get over it. They're coming for the churches now. We have already seen how Christian schools are being deconstructed. We're going to see a little bit later in the show how a couple of Catholic schoolboys from Kentucky are getting the same kind of treatment. Guilty before, without any evidence. We're shaming them, we're doxing them, we're calling them out. When we start asking the question, should Christianity, because it is not inclusive in a progressive way, because it doesn't include everything, including non-Christian values. See, that's the catch, right? Inclusivity has replaced diversity as the buzzword. And to the degree that Christianity believes in Christian principles, it is now not inclusive and therefore can be persecuted and excluded this way.
But that's the thing. I mean, it's because Karen Pence is going to teach at a Christian school. It's not, well, look at this woman getting out there, taking her career. Who cares if her husband's a vice president? She's a career woman. She can do what she wants to. Now, we know that, you know, the notorious AOC and Halib and all of those other fresh women in Congress would be high-fiving Karen Pence if she was going to an Islamic school or anything else, but it's Christianity specific, and that's just a red flag.
Not only do you have Muslim members of Congress who are already demonstrating their native anti-Semitism, right? Both of those women have stood in support of Linda Sarsour, the radical Jew-hating leader of these women's marches. There is no such angle from CNN. No CNN anchor has ever asked, should we discount the Women's March because you've got some really serious Islamic anti-Semites behind it? No, that's acceptable. As long as you are trashing Christianity, anything goes. You can trash Israel, you can trash Christianity with almost a plum, it seems, and no one seems to care. Yet you've got it seems to me that Karen Pence is not teaching theology, guys, at this Christian school. She is not. She's an art teacher, right? She's going in to teach art to little kids. And the fact that their school is a traditional Christian school, you got idiots now wondering, should we protect her? Should we use taxpayer money to defend her right to practice her faith? It's like this. It's like people at CNN have never read the First Amendment.
They haven't.
No, they haven't.
I doubt they have. All right, well, we have an Indiana state representative who said that, you know what, like it or not, teachers have become the parents. So the Indiana General Assembly Courts and Criminal Code Committee last week heard testimony of HB 1004 from Representative Wendy McNamara. She is not only a state rep, but she's also the director of Evansville-Vandenberg School Corps Early College High School. Say that 10 times. And she had this to say when it came to protecting parents' rights.
The stark reality of today is not the same as it was 20 years ago. I have trouble finding a parent, okay? My kids are raising themselves. So to have the illusion that parents are going to be readily accessible, available anytime 24/7, and I'm not just referring to the survey, I'm just referring to mental health in general. Teachers have become the parent. Whether we like it or not, we are their first resource. So this reality that we are under today is a stark contrast to 20 years ago.
So the bill she's referring to is supposed to be about school safety and basically how funding will work for that. But within the bill, hidden, it says that beginning in the fall, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is going to be given in each public school, charter school, and accredited non-public school to students in grades 9 to 12, with them having the opportunity to participate, and that each school, corporation, and charter school needs to identify and enter into an agreement with a provider or providers to provide appropriate and necessary mental health services to students.
Yeah, this is when educational fascism gets real, America. We've been telling you about this for years. We've had people in our comment section, we've had half-wits chiming in on our show that this won't happen, that parents' rights are going to be absolutely respected. You just heard this apparently Xanax-drugged school administrator talking to you in a very calm, very kind of Nurse Ratched voice about how, like it or not, teachers are now the first responders, really? That your kid wakes up in the morning at home in his own bed, you feed him breakfast, but you are not the first contact for the kid? That somehow the teachers are the first contacts for the kids?
Well, they're the main contacts, too. That to have that, what she said, to have the illusion that parents are going to be readily accessible, available anytime, 24/7. But the schools are going to be readily accessible 24. That's
so
the key.
You've got them for 7, 8 hours a day, public schools, and that's enough for the whole day. But moms and dads who are with them most of the rest of the time, they don't have your authority. It is not a foregone conclusion. It is not like it or not. You are not the primary educators of our kids. The fact is that moms and dads continue in record numbers to drop their kids off at these public schools and allow you to play mom and dad. And what are you doing with this? You're sexualizing our children at young ages. You're teaching 5-year-olds things we would never teach 5-year-olds because they don't understand them. And now, mandatory mental health surveys. Oh, and Mom and Dad America, are you paying attention? It's for all charter schools in the state. So you pull your kid out of a public school, you put him in an alternatively funded charter school, and you think, hey, my kid's not getting Common Core check again. You think, hey, because this is not public school, my kids are going to be free from this kind of intrusive nonsense. Hey, no, it's not so. Charter schools, we've been warning you about that too. Great idea in theory, but if the charter school takes state or federal money, and Indiana charter schools do, then ultimately the state gets to tell them what to do. You send your kids to public schools to learn math and reading and history and science. We're not doing that anymore because we are now the parents, not the teachers. They're going to do your job, which means, I suppose, in a sane world, Mom and Dad, you would spend your free time teaching kids math and science because they won't. Or better yet, just pull them out. Just pull them out. Keep control of your kids' social and psychological development in your hands, their moral and spiritual development in your hands. Keep it there. And then find somebody else to teach your kids a little bit of math, a little bit of reading, a little bit of science.
And what you just summed up is also what Ziva Dahl has said. She's a senior fellow with the News and Public Policy Group Haim Solomon Center. She wrote a good summation of basically what our students are experiencing in the schools today. She's saying that education is quickly becoming propaganda in our primary and secondary schools. She begins by stating that academics have hijacked our universities into conformance with the Marxist view that all events involve class struggle. Every issue is seen through the lens of victims versus oppressors, and social injustice is to blame for all that is wrong. The Weltanschauung has become totalitarian groupthink on campuses, shutting down dialogue and diversity of opinion. Now, I know you've experienced that on your own campus, but here's what's happening. Teacher training seminars inculcate postmodern, post-colonialist identity politics. Private and public school teachers appreciate easy access to time-saving teaching manuals, handouts, and curriculum guides to help design their classes. So these materials often encapsulate claims about the evils of Western colonialism, white privilege, and the oppression of marginalized groups within our so-called endemically racist and sexist culture. And it's coming down from the universities and into your K-12 schools.
I'm really glad we're doing this story, but I hasten to remind you, we've been talking about this for how long? This is not news. The fact that educational watchdogs, the fact that some university professors we'll see coming up are beginning to come around to this view, just shows you how far behind the lag is. This is not a new thing. It's been going on for a long time. The idea that your kid's primary purpose in classroom is indoctrination. If you watch the Dr. Duke Show, and I hope you will religiously, and Katie and I, we go through this every single week. I've been doing the Common Core stuff for 7-8 years now, and it goes back 5 and 10 years before that. No Child Left Behind did much of this same stuff as well, sacrificing your kid's education for what the state and the federal government thinks is welfare-related issues, sociological, psychological, clinical. Here you go. It's good that Ms. Dahl is on this. She's exactly right. It's not news, though. It's kind of like the horses really fled the barn door and the buildings are burning down. The question is, what do you do about it, Mrs. Dahl? You're right. We've been on this for a long time, and one of the things that I think you can do, the only thing I think meaningly you can do right now, is to push back against this by removing your kids as much as possible from the corrupting circumstances. Don't allow it to happen. I mean, if you can't find a good private school and you won't homeschool your kids, you got to come up with an alternative, because this is what collectively the schools are doing. And I don't want to hear this argument anymore that it's not my school. I don't want to hear this argument anymore that somehow the federal government has consolidated its power over all the public schools in 50 states, but your kids is getting around it because you know your kid's first grade teacher and she would never do that. Get over this. They're going to get this garbage now. They are going to be treated as the children in the wards of the school, not yours.
Well, and she even says that the school teachers, the first grade school teacher, appreciate easy access to time-saving teaching manuals, handouts, curriculum. And for some of these teachers, even the ones who want to put together their own curriculum, they're not allowed to. There's a lot of schools that have mandatory curriculum, and they have to just follow the script.
Well, and that's it. And it's easy. The idea that teachers... We've reached the point where we've got a majority of teachers, apparently, according to Ms. Dahl, who would rather be handed propaganda than go to the trouble of crafting a curriculum. And even if they want to, like you said, they're not allowed to. I have this conversation with young teachers routinely, many of whom are fleeing the profession. I would not recommend for any bright kid to go into education, to go into the education field. The smart ones will get bored. The smart ones aren't going to be able to sit there and become basically drones or facilitators for everybody else's paradigm. And the more our public schools fail, the more they double down on ideology, the more they double down on politics, the more they double down on social engineering. As the grades go lower, the more they ratchet up this stuff. Any smart kid worth her salt who thinks they want to be a teacher, who thinks they can work in an environment where they have no intellectual freedom, no ability to reject bad pedagogy in the favor of something better, you're going to burn out quick. Don't do it. Let the schools become filled with ignoramuses then, and then maybe when it collapses under the weight of that, people will make a change.
Okay. Well, on a college campus in Georgia, we have a TA who's saying that some people may have to die. Arami Osai Frimpong is a philosophy TA and PhD student at the University of Georgia, and in a now-deleted Facebook comment, he said, "Some white people may have to die for black communities to be made whole in this struggle to advance to freedom. To pretend that's not the case is ahistorical and dangerously naive." Now, this TA is known for being a little bit of a provocateur, shall we say. on Twitter earlier this month. He said he supports integrated schools and that, quote, fighting white people is a skill. You have to get used to fighting white people. It takes practice.
Take a look at the guy. He looks like he belongs like an extra in a Mel Brooks movie, right? Can't you just see him in Blazing Saddles? I tell you what, this is a teaching assistant at a university. But I guess the point that I would make about it is this. Everything we've just seen about how Mrs. Dahl pointed out to us that education is becoming terribly polemical, that the schools are beginning to argue that they are your kids' parents, and you get this kind of stuff. It's okay to kill whitey if you're a TA, an African-American TA in a university. You can argue, you have absolute academic freedom if you are a minority, and this is the paradigm. Minority professors keep arguing that they have no freedom. Minority professors keep arguing that they can't speak, no one listens to them, that their worldviews are being ignored, and yet they can say things like this. They can say things like, maybe we have to kill white people and teach kids how to fight white people, physically, not just intellectually, but fight white people and kill them. You can say that on a college campus and very little is going to happen to you.
Well, in fact, the University of Georgia spokesperson for the Equal Opportunities Office defended what he said.
That's right.
And of course, their argument is, well, it's his personal opinion. Because it was on Facebook. It wasn't in a classroom. So they're trying to get you there. But there are people who've reported that he says this stuff, obviously, in his classes. Right.
Our universities have become absolute cesspools of really nasty radical opinions. As long as they're left-wing radical opinions, they almost can't be too leftist. They can't be too violent. They can't be too evocative. They can't be too sexualized. They can't be too denigrating. And meanwhile, anybody else who's not part of those little niche cultures, they better watch what they say. And the University of Georgia defended this, right? That as long as he didn't say, I want to kill white people on my campus, there's not much we can do about it. I support his right to say it. Yeah, there's a bunch of hypocrites going on there.
The only thing that they got the pushback for is a former reporter for Campus Reform, Andrew Lawrence. He tweeted a message to the university saying that he's sharing his own opinion and saying that alumni and donors should reconsider their support for the university. And as soon as money got involved, the university responded saying, the university has been vigorously exploring all legal options. Racism has no place on our campus, and we condemn the advocacy or suggestion of violence in any form.
But I thought universities like Georgia, the ones in Georgia, argued that black people like this innocent fellow can't be racist. When he wants to kill you, Katie, when he says you need to die, it's not because he's a racist. I don't know what it's because, but it's not because he's a racist. What would it be? He doesn't know you, Whitey. He doesn't know you, Whitey. I mean, he just wants you dead.
Yep.
But it's not racism.
No.
No, and what is the major reason why he wants you dead? Because you're white.
Right.
But that's not racism. Because his black skin color precludes him from being a racist.
That's
you see?
correct. Yes.
See how that works?
Okay.
See, it doesn't matter the racist things you say or the racism in your heart. If you have a darker skin color, it's not racism.
Well, I identify
He doesn't want you dead because you wear Argyle sweaters. He wants you dead.
Many people do,
well,
by
that's
the way.
Right. And that actually is probably a more justifiable argument. What he wants you dead
I'm
before
cheap,
he
okay?
wants you are cheap, but what he wants you dead is because you're white. And that's not racist to these Georgia universities. It's not racist.
Well, by now, pretty much everyone has heard the story about the Covington Catholic High School boys who are from Covington. It's in Kentucky. Now, these boys were at the Lincoln Memorial this past weekend for the March for Life, and they got caught in a viral video, and it made it appear like they were mocking an elderly Native American man. Now, chaos ensued by the media since the boys were wearing MAGA hats, and anytime you see that little red hat out, they're triggered. So what happened is multiple videos have since come out and revealing that, dare I say, stoic look on the teenager's face while there was a man beating a drum in his face. It shows a whole different story than what the media reported on.
Yeah, and this has been covered from a lot of angles. The angle that I want to take is one that is getting too little press. If you accuse these boys of hate crimes for something, and they didn't, right? They were accused of a hate crime. They were accused of surrounding a Native American, screaming in his ear, shouting, build the wall, that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not even sure that's a hate crime. Even if they had done that, they had surrounded this Native American gentleman and shouted to him, MAGA, 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 build the wall. I'm not sure that rises to a hate crime. They're not saying anything necessarily insulting, particularly about this guy. They're not saying they hate him, but none of that happened. What you had was a group of radical black left-wing activists who, and I'm going to be very blunt here, called these kids faggots. Where is the LGBTQ response to this? If any white kid had used the word faggot when describing a group of any kind of kids, the LGBTQ would be all over that. Where is the CNN's LGBTQ outrage over this? Where are the feminists in this in terms of some of the insults that these African-American activists hurled? They called these kids incest-driven. They called them future school shooters. They said they should be killed, murdered. Where is your outrage? That's the real thing. Where's Hollywood's outrage?
So Alyssa Milano, and all the negative wisdom that she has, decided to wake up, because it was like hashtag thoughts when I wake up, and saying that the MAGA hat is replacing the KKK hood.
But it's worse than that. She also argued, Alyssa Milano, that the fact that young white males were at were at an anti-abortion rally already meant that they deserved whatever grief they got. How dare young white Christian boys show up to defend life? What doesn't matter, Alyssa Milano said, that they said nothing to the Native American. It doesn't matter that actually they were persecuted. It doesn't matter that African Americans threatened them with death and violence. What matters is young white boys show up to defend life, and they are already guilty in advance, and that's the problem. These white boys, just like the Virginia rape case, just like the Duke lacrosse rape case, these kids were hounded and harassed, not because of anything they did, but because their demographic is the one you're allowed to hate, and you must hate if you're a progressive. All white males are guilty. Think about Brett Kavanaugh. All white males are guilty. All fraternity boys are guilty. All Christians, all Catholic boys, all boys who grow up and go to private schools, they're all guilty of white privilege, racism, bigotry, and homophobia. It doesn't matter if it's true. The fact that 2 of the 4 people who accused Kavanaugh now admitted that they did it for political reasons doesn't matter.
Well, and you talk about Alyssa Milano, but Kathy Griffin's response is the one that gets me, because she actually tweeted out saying that what the school said in reply initially was pathetic and impotent. Name these kids. I want names. In all caps. Shame them. If you think these effers wouldn't dox you in a heartbeat, think again. And to be doxxed is to get all your personal information put out online. And they did that to these teenage boys, 16-year-old boys, who just stood silently as they were being yelled at, and now their lives are being just handed
that
to them.
shows you the ignorant bigotry of Kathy Griffin, is that's a surprise to anybody. She really believes that 16-year-old Catholic schoolboys would have gone to the trouble to find out Kathy Griffin's address and publish it to the world. They wouldn't have done no such thing. They wouldn't have had any idea how to do this. You're projecting all of your adult stereotypes on race and sex and gender onto these boys. You've been taught, Kathy Griffin, Alyssa Milano, you've been taught to believe that white boys, Christian white boys, toxic masculinity, toxic Christianity, white privilege, are responsible for all the evils of the world. And almost every time you swing at these kids, you miss, because they don't do the things you think they've done. And another thing, I'm not hearing any apologies. I'm not hearing any apologies. I've heard some backpedaling, or some of these outlets will say, well, there's 2 sides to every story. Yeah, that's right. There's the right side and the wrong side. You, at CNN, chose the wrong side. Rather than apologize, admit your mistake, and try to make amends to these kids, you just simply point out, well, there's more than one story. We're not going to tell you which one is correct. We're not going to argue that we made a mistake. We'll just show you that facts are complicated when we find ourselves, again, lying. Fake news. You know, I don't care if you love Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump. If there is nothing else Donald Trump has done for the good of this country, is the phrase fake news. Because every single day, the mainstream media seems to back up that point. Every single time, they overreact and prove his point for him.
Yeah, they're living down to his expectations.
There you
go. Which is good for them, not at all for us. All right, just one more thing on this, because I want Nick Sandmann, that's the junior, the one who is being ridiculed, especially about his smirk. Because a lot of people have addressed this, and they haven't put it into context. He put out a statement, a 2-page statement explaining his side of the story. And I just wanted, regarding the smirk especially, he says, I was not intentionally making faces at the protester. I did smile at one point because I wanted him to know that I was not going to become angry, intimidated, or be provoked into a larger confrontation. I am a faithful Christian and practicing Catholic, and I always try to live up to the ideals my faith teaches me, to remain respectful of others and to take no action that would lead to conflict or violence. To have that come out of the mouth of a 16-year-old who could have easily, with someone up in his face beating a drum, I would have socked the man.
And more to it than that. The progressive left, CNN, the news media, they could not find any evidence that he shouted, could not find any evidence that those boys harassed or bullied, can find no evidence that those boys in any way, shape, or form used racial epithets. On the contrary, they were surrounded by African-American protesters, and then then the Native American walked up to them and started drumming right in their faces. So you can't find a single thing that this boy did wrong except his smirk. And what you call a smirk, CNN, because that's all you got. That little smirk, that little tough smile. It was a stiff upper lip is what it was. Here's a kid trying hard to keep it together when he's got an adult beating a drum right in his face trying to get to provoke a response from him. That is a stiff upper lip. You could find nothing else against this boy, left-wing media, so you turned a sneer of resolve. You've turned it into a racial statement because you got nothing. God bless this kid. It was a stiff upper lip. He gave a wonderful statement in the aftermath of all of that, and still, the progressive left has not apologized or made amends. Lawyers now have volunteered to work with some of these boys. There needs to be a comeuppance for this. If Kathleen Blasey Ford got $1 million, right? Christine Blasey Ford got $1 million for her brave attempt to take down Judge Kavanaugh. These kids, who on film we see being radically abused, being violated in very serious ways, threatened and demeaned, they ought to get at least that much.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, with them being a Catholic school, do you live up to your faith? That's the main thing. Live up to your faith.
I think
and
they
do
did.
What's right.
I think they did.
And do what's right moving forward with it. They had to cancel school because of security reasons.
Right.
That's, I mean, all this.
And
is
that
just
tells you
chaos.
everything. That you force a Catholic school to shutter its doors because of something boys were accused of, even though there's definitive evidence that they didn't do it. That doesn't stop the progressive left. There will be no apologizing. And that's why I think lawyers have to get involved. You sue CNN, you sue Kathy Griffin. Kathy Griffin demanded their addresses, and demanded the kind of behavior that's happening to these kids happen. Dox them, go after them. You had people at CNN demanding that they be punched in the face. Some people, Bukhari, Jose, was that his name? I think Bukhari, somebody. Some people deserve to be punched in the face, he said.
Christians around the world need to look at this case and stand up for it. This is, if this isn't clear evidence that they're going to attack you, I don't know what is. But I do want to give a shout out to Representative Thomas Massey.
Oh,
who
yeah.
actually just coincidentally happens to be the representative for these boys. And he actually took the time. A representative did work. Took the time. He went through all the film he could see before he made judgment in condemning or condoning what the kids did. I was so proud of him.
If there was one member of the House or Senate in whose district you didn't want this to happen, liberals, it's Tom Massey. You just put this in, and God works in mysterious ways. Those boys defended themselves with honor and dignity. They are a credit to their faith and a credit to their school, and they're a credit to their state. And it just so happens that their congressman, Representative Tom Massey, he ain't playing, baby. If I may appropriate a certain ethnic dialect, he ain't playing. You can bet that Massey is going to go to the wall for these kids, and we have not heard the end of this yet.
That's correct. Well, Monday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and as a way to celebrate, the president of the University of Notre Dame emailed all his students saying that the school's decided to cover up a mural of Christopher Columbus. How those two interact, we don't know, but that's how they teach history these days. So in an email, President John Jenkins explained that the mural had been in the main building on campus since the 1880s and was put up for the school's mostly Catholic immigrant population, and Columbus is believed to have been Catholic. But he said, in recent years, however, many have come to see the murals as, at best, blind to the consequences of Columbus's voyage for the indigenous peoples who inhabited the New World, and at worst, demeaning toward them. And so, murals would no longer be visible. The university would immediately begin the production of woven coverings to leave the aged art intact, yet covered and hidden from view.
So, Father Jenkins, and I'm not going to call you President Jenkins. You may be the president of Notre Dame, but you're a priest. Shame on you. You're a disgrace to your robes. You're a disgrace to your collar. You understand, Father, that if what you just said is true, that a 125-year-old work of art that captures the moment that Columbus interacted with Native Americans is now offensive, if, as you said, in recent years, some people have begun to argue that that has to go. That's all it takes to make you to get rid of it on Martin Luther King Day. Then understand this, Father Jenkins. One of the evils that, according to these same people who got you to take down the Columbus mural, one of the evils that was brought to this nation by Columbus was Roman Catholicism. You have to step down. Notre Dame should immediately give, its entire board of trustees should cede the property and cede the academic institution to a Native American group, put a Native American in charge of it as a way of reparations. I repeat myself. If you buy, and I don't, the ridiculous argument that any discussion of Columbus 200, 400 years ago has some impact today, that we have to judge Columbus 400 years later by the mores of social justice warriors living today, by that same indictment, your entire Catholic school should be ceded to Native Americans. Your job should be immediately eradicated in the name of a Native American hierarch who will run the school. Because again, when you talked about the spreading of disease and misinformation, when you spread about the clash of cultures, when you said about the participation of overriding Native American rights, your Roman Catholic Church had quite a bit to do with that. Don't blame it on Columbus. Columbus was one man. Columbus's impact on Native American populations was relatively small. Oh, the conquistadors who came after him had a much bigger role to play in the conquest of the New World. And you know what? Columbus's personal footprint in the New World was pretty small. The Roman Catholic Church that came in the wake of Columbus had a much bigger role to play than did Columbus. Give up your collar, give up your job, Father. You're a shame and a disgrace that you let modern bullies and scolds with a radical agenda talk you into covering up a work of art. And Martin Luther King Day, you could have at least done it on Columbus Day. That would have had somewhere, but you're going to hide behind the Christian cover of Martin Luther King to do this. You are a coward and you are a quisling and you gotta go.
This Catholic is going to now turn it over to the interview that Dr. Duke and Alex Newman did about California and its now 15 genders they're going to teach kindergartners.
Time now to talk to our international correspondent, Alex Newman. Alex, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Duke.
Hey, you've done another piece of great work, my friend. From the I Told You So files, the state of California is now moving to mandate that kindergarten teachers teach 5-year-olds 15 different genders in every single California kindergarten school. 15 different genders being presented to 5-year-olds. Talk a little bit about this story.
Yeah, so this is the update to their health education framework. And I mean, people need to look through the materials here that we've talked about. You have stuff like teaching the kids that adults guess what gender a baby is because babies can't talk. It is absolute insanity masquerading as education, and it's sick.
So to make sure we understand what's happening here, the state of California has recommended, and when California recommends something, that means they want it in there. They've recommended a book for 5-year-olds to begin to comprehend the complicated nature of gender. As a matter of fact, in this book, you're teaching 5-year-olds 15 different gender variants. The title of the book, by the way, is called Who Are You? Inside the book, they say, quote, for some people, there are more than just 2 choices. These are a few of the words people use. And you're exposing 5-year-olds to these kinds of gender differentiations. Trans, genderqueer, non-binary, gender fluid, transgender, gender neutral, agender, neutrois, bigender, third gender, two-spirit, whatever the hell that means, and even more words on the word salad spectrum. These are kids that cannot read. These are kids who don't understand the biological underpinning of masculine and feminine or male and female. These are kids who are simply basically trying to come to grips with their own physicality in terms of their bodies. Their minds have not developed abstract thinking yet, and yet you're going to hit them with things like bigender, two-spirit gender, agender. This is an impossibility for little kids. You are doing nothing at age 5 but putting words in their heads, forcing them to understand things that adults only understand. You're guiding them along a path of indoctrination that is staggeringly inappropriate.
Yeah, well, that's the insanity that we're dealing with now, and we see that it's very effective. If you look, we covered at the Freedom Project in the Newman Report, we covered a study out of the UCLA where more than 25% of California children between 12 and 17 are now gender non-conforming. So they're not comfortable, or they don't identify with their biological gender. So I guess they thought 27% was not enough, and so they want to start early in kindergarten with this 15 different gender thing. But as soon as the next revision comes around, 15 will be outdated, that'll be discriminatory, and then we'll be off to 68 or a million. That's the insanity that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I want to comment on that. I guarantee you that 89 to 99% of young elementary schools in Hitler's Germany, the Hitlerjugend, actually believe they were Nazis too. If you substitute real learning in elementary school for this kind of propaganda, whether it's radical fascist propaganda or radical transgender propaganda, if you try to convince 5-year-olds who do not have the intellectual or brain development to understand the nuances and the abstract differences between male and female on a biological level, on a personal level, let alone introducing 13 other genders, you are guaranteeing that kids are being brainwashed and that they're going to identify with this stuff not because they feel that way, but because they're getting rewarded and urged to do so. And the other thing, Alex, also, this is the most alarming aspect of this. Thank you, California. According to California's new law, if they pass it, moms and dads will be utterly unable to opt their kids out of this. You will not be able to hold your 5-year-old kindergarten kid home if they're teaching 15 genders. You're going to have to, under the peril of the law, compel your kids to attend this.
That's right. And in fact, that's the situation now in Orange County, one of the most conservative counties in California. We covered this also at the Newman Report. They said that parents may not opt their children out of instruction on the homosexuality, the transgenderism, the new families and all that kind of stuff. And people need to look through this. So what it is in addition to insanity, it's a direct assault on the fundamental building block of civilization, which is the family.
It used to be that parents had the final say. Now we've moved from parental consent to parental mandates, that as parents, you will subject your kids to this kind of stuff. We know better than you do. And when it comes to radical sexual politics, don't forget, Alex, we talked just the last time we were together about how California has among the lowest performing literacy rates of any state in the union. They are educating their kids much less well than most every other state when it comes to reading, when it comes to math, when it comes to basic knowledge. Now in kindergarten, we're sacrificing more valuable learning time to this incredibly made up, utterly unresearched, completely terra incognita kind of transformation of our kids, with no sociological studies of what this will mean down the road, with no science really underwriting this, with no real pedagogy being able to justify this kind of encroachment on parental rights and this kind of brainwashing of kids. It's happening at breakneck speed in California.
That's right. It is a tragedy of monumental proportions. And the government's own data shows that more than half of California's children cannot read, even at a proficient level. Less than 1/4 of black boys in California in the government school system can read at a proficient level. And here they are worrying about how they're going to teach them about 15 genders in kindergarten. They ought to be figuring out how to teach these poor kids to read. But unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing. We're just seeing, again, the destruction of civilization, the destruction of education, all being done under the guise of education.
All right, and in our final story today, we're going to take a look at an Indiana bill which is proposing students pass the U.S. citizenship test before earning their high school diploma. Amen, hallelujah, I say to this. State Senator Dennis Cruz, he wants high school students to pass the 100-question citizenship test to earn their diploma. In Senate Bill 132 would require them to pass this test, so starting in the 2021 school year. He says there's a deficiency in government and civics knowledge, and it's getting worse. And we know this to be the case. The NAAP found that only 24% of high school students are proficient in civics, and a study by the Annenberg Foundation found that a full third of the U.S. citizens can't even name one branch of our federal government.
I know you've got something planned, kind of fun, but before I do that, I have to say that I'm a little bit contrarian on this story. I get it. I think it's a good idea that graduating high school seniors should have to answer 100 questions. But think about it. This is the test we give to immigrants who don't speak English and who have never spent one day in an American school. To make that low bar the bar for graduating seniors who have been in school since they were 5 years old. These are kids who have spent 15 of the first 20 years in school, the first 15 formative years of their lives. They've been educated day in and day out in the public schools. And at this point, they cannot answer enough questions to pass the citizenship test. I get it. If you get them to the point where they can answer those 100 questions, you will have begun civics knowledge as they should have got it by the time they completed 8th grade.
Well, I see where you're saying. What my perspective is not that they're taking another test, that they're, because they spend enough time taking stupid tests, but this is actually would make it so they're having to learn something along the way that's going to be beneficial to them. That's my goal, is understanding where and how our country was founded.
I get it, but I still disagree with you. I mean, you're asking them, the solution is not to give them an 8th grade test. The solution is not to give them, I mean, it's better than nothing. We agree with that. Yeah. And it's a step in the right direction. But again, you're asking them to take a test. And here's the thing. You don't even have to teach them history classes. You can have a 2-week segment of your traditional senior history class, which is devoted to colonialism, feminism, and Marxism, and go through the 100 questions 3 times over 2 weeks, and they could pass the test. How about we implement a real teaching paradigm in our kids' schools where by the time they graduate high school, they don't just know most aspects of American history, but they are certified in civics way beyond a test we'd give a Polish immigrant who spent no time in our kids' classrooms and who speaks no English.
All right. Are you ready?
I am ready.
These are the actual questions from the citizenship test. So play along at home. Number 1, what are the 2 parts of the U.S. Congress? Because yes, there are 2 parts. Is it A, Supreme Court President, B, President Senate, C, Senate House of Representatives, D, Supreme Court House of Representatives?
I did not realize that not only is this test pretty remediary, it's also multiple choice.
Yes, it
I'm
is.
so disillusioned. I actually thought the citizenship test would have been asking questions that you had to answer. Now you get to pick. Well, then I'm going to pick, the House and the Senate.
House of what?
The House of Representatives.
There,
This
say
actually,
it full.
This
Say it
actually waters it down. Oh, you've broken my heart by reading
Fine.
the actual.
You know what? Then you're going to answer without them.
All right.
All right, number 2. What is one right or freedom from the First Amendment?
Freedom of speech.
Give me another.
Assembly.
Yep.
Press. Mm-hmm. I guess there's 3.
Number 3. What are 2 rights that are only for United States citizens? A, voting in a federal election and running for federal office. B, freedom of religion and running for federal office. C, voting in a federal election and creating federal laws. D, ability to bear arms and appeal claims.
A,
voting in a federal election. Let's say that one again. You have to be a citizen
to vote in a federal election
and
or to run for federal office. Right, yes.
Let's just mull that one over, everyone. Yeah. Number 4. What is freedom of religion? Is it A, you can practice any religion or not practice a religion? Is it B, you can practice any religion from a list provided by Great Britain? Is it C, you can practice religion without being charged money? Or D, you can talk about other people's religions?
Yeah, of course, that's A. Not only are you free to practice no religion, you can practice any religion, which means this artificial boundary between church and state is a made-up bit of nonsense, right? That the Founding Fathers were not trying to prohibit the expression of religion, even in government. They were trying to protect it. But thanks to robed Supreme Court justices, that's been changed.
Again, let us know how you did on this citizenship test. But in the meantime, head over to drdukeshow.com. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, share it with all of your friends, and I guess, you know what? Give them the citizenship test too.
And that does it for us this week on The Dr. Duke Show. If you like what you heard, please share the podcast with your friends. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. We'll see you next time.